give people another minute or so so that they can join and we can begin. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, and welcome to Turning Camera Traps into Coexistence, which is a special World Lion Day webinar that's hosted by Lion Landscapes and AZA, Safe African Lion. My name is Alex. I am the Digital Communications Officer here at Lion Landscapes, and I'll be moderating today's conversation. So please continue sharing. You will be allowed to share your questions as we go along through the Q&A section, but feel free to add anything you have in the chat. So today, on who will be helping us on the panelist, we have Professor Amy Dickman, who is a co-CEO for Lion Landscapes. We have Dr. Lily Maynard, and then we have Gabriel, who is also the field manager for Lion Landscapes Laikipia team. So I'll welcome all of them to just introduce themselves before we continue, and I'll start with Professor Amy Dickman.
Thanks so much, Alex, and thank you everyone for showing up and listening to the webinar, and happy World Lion Day, everyone. So really excited to be here, have a little bit of a chat, hear about some of the work that we're doing at Lion Landscapes and how we're partnering with AZA, and super excited to have this discussion with you all.
Hi, I'm Lily. I'm jumping right in, Alex. I figured you'd call me next, and thrilled to be here with everyone celebrating World Lion Day. And thanks everyone who's watching the recording. We're thrilled to be celebrating this growing collaboration between Lion Landscapes and the AZA Safe African Lion program. I'm Lily. I'm the Vice President of Conservation Impact at the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. And I also am the program leader for the AZA Safe African Lion program. So it's my honor to get to work with and try to rally and connect with what's important at different zoos and aquariums that have lions in their care, or just care about this amazing iconic species, and find ways that we can work together to support amazing conservationists on the ground, working in range in Africa, helping people to coexist with them. And that's our main focus. And we are starting our new campaign to focus on that in a collaboration with Lion Landscapes that we'll be highlighting today. So thanks everyone for being here.
Hi everyone, my name's Gabriel Nyausi. I'm from Laikipia, Kenya, and I'm really excited to get a chance to speak to the team about turning cameras into coexistence. Yeah, you're most welcome, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all for introducing yourselves. So we'll go right ahead to the first question, and this question will be for Amy. Just to tell us briefly, for someone who is new to the program, just to explain what is the Community Camera Trap Plus or CCT Plus, what problem it was created to address, and also just what made Lion Landscapes think that a different approach was needed in that sense. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, Alex, and great to see everyone here. So thank you very much for showing up. Yeah, it's a really good question, because when you see these sorts of panels about things like coexistence and camera traps, I think it sounds a bit strange sometimes, because people think of camera traps and they think of ecological monitoring. They think of this kind of different track from the research compared to the conservation. And for us, when we were looking at sort of trying to establish these programs out in Tanzania and in Kenya, we were working a lot with local communities, and obviously our main focus was reducing the cost that those people experience from living with large carnivores. So we were reinforcing livestock enclosures. We're trying to make sure that people can keep themselves and their livestock safe. And at the same time, we knew that that was never going to be enough. We had to develop benefit systems that worked for the communities to give people really tangible benefits from the presence of lions and other large carnivores and wildlife in general. So we started working with communities and asking them which benefits they wanted. And they said things like investments in education, healthcare, veterinary medicine, the kinds of things you would expect. And so for several years, we were giving those benefits out, but people were still feeling very antagonistic about lions and other carnivores and still killing them. And of course, people are just normal, rational people. They take the benefits, but because the benefits are linked to the project, not specifically the wildlife, they still kill the wildlife, still feel negative about the wildlife, even if they're feeling positive about the people. And at the same time, we were placing camera traps out for wildlife monitoring, and people stealing the camera traps because they didn't feel engaged in the project. They didn't feel that, they didn't understand why they were there. So to answer your question, really, the reason how it came from that was it came from a position of desperation. I think a lot of innovation comes from desperation, things going wrong. So both the camera trapping and the benefit programs weren't working as they should. So we sat with the communities and we said to them, how could this be better? And they said, we need to think of how the benefits come from the wildlife and how the villagers see that it's from the wildlife. So they said, give us the camera traps and we will place them out there. And then we worked out a system with them where every picture of a wild animal would generate a certain number of points, and those points would eventually be translated into direct benefits that the communities chose. So suddenly people get super excited when they see a camera trap picture of a lion or a genet or an impala or whatever else, because that very directly leads, they know, into community benefit. So it took us out from being sort of the middleman in the whole thing and saying, we are only here because the wildlife is giving you this benefit. And then that developed, that was the original community camera trapping, CCT, and eventually that expanded into what we call CCT Plus, which was then introducing some penalties into the system and additional benefits that could be got from conservation-friendly behaviours, things like reinforcing livestock enclosures, etc. So, and then the penalties came for things like poisoning events, snaring events, but again, done very clearly with the communities to think about how do you generate a really locally accepted conservation programme that it really is focused around the benefits that come directly from wildlife presence, because these are the people that suffer the costs of it. So that was where it started, and it's grown from them. We're very excited to sort of broaden it with this coalition of people.
Okay, thank you so much, Amy, for that. So you're going to move to maybe the field perspective, and I'm going to welcome Gabriel just to share a bit on before CCT Plus, what challenges were expected of living alongside large carnivores. How did that look in practice for the local communities? So welcome, Gabriel.
Thank you, Alex, for the question. And traditionally, communities and landowners have always lived with majorly carnivores, and they've always gotten losses, losing their animals to carnivores. They never had any tangible benefits. So that has been the experience before, which now really changes the perspective of carnivores, especially for communities and landowners. They see much more of losing their cattle, sheep for lions, and they don't get any benefit in returns. So apart from probably here in Laikipia, large ranchers who operate lodges and other tourism facilities sort of around, they used to get a benefit for the local communities, they had zero benefit of from having lion within their areas. So CCT Plus is a program really has come up and given them a reason as to why they need to see wild animals, and especially carnivores in their midst, and in the long run, changing their behavior positively towards coexisting with carnivores. And we've seen that one over a period of time, that there are signs we see which indicate now the community are now positively agreeing to exist with carnivores because they are deriving benefits from the carnivores around.
Okay. So thank you so much, Gabriel, for that. My next question will go back to Amy in just trying to ask, why is it important that the communities themselves chose the kind of benefits that they receive, and also for the positive conservation actions, not just the wildlife sightings, to be rewarded? And just how does that point system work?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Alex. So, yeah, I was just explaining a teeny bit on the chat, but it's really important that the communities should drive this, just because, as we said, it's their land, it's their wildlife, it's their livelihoods that are at risk from this. So it's super important that it's not seen as something imposed externally. It's really co-developed with local people, as Gabriel was saying, that we are working with them to say what makes sense for you. And that comes all the way down to which species should generate which points on the camera traps. You talk locally about which ones cause more problems, which species are more valued or more difficult to live with in various ways. And then when you've discussed sort of the number of points, so each wild animal that's camera trapped gets a certain number of points, and it's every individual. And then those points are collated over time, and then eventually they are translated into additional community benefits. And those will go to the priority areas that the community themselves say is valuable. So it might be something about, increasing the amount of wildlife medicine, for example, veterinary medicine, for example, that goes to the communities so they reduce the burden from disease. So that needs to be locally tailored and making sure that it's addressing the problems that those communities are facing. And then that means that they feel really represented. And it also does mean that the solutions are tailored to their greatest needs.
Okay, thank you, Amy. And with that, we're going just to involve you now as the audience. We have a question for you in terms of asking which species do you think should receive the most CCT plus points? So my colleague's just sharing her screen. Yeah, you are allowed to scan the QR code on the screen once it's live, and then go to menti.com and enter the code shown, and then share your comment with us. There you go. We have you can either scan the QR code or just go to menti.com and use that code and share what you think. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. We're just waiting for a few more people to share their comments. So just good to see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, some more comments are still coming in, but just if you look at the image on your screen, I'm just going to welcome Amy just to say a little about that in terms of what you think and in terms of what people are thinking on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting to see these results because actually it tracks very closely to the reality of the number of points for these species. So originally we had lions and large carnivores as they got the most points. So in Tanzania, for example, a lion would get 15,000 points. It's interesting that I think people want higher points. It's somehow related to the currency. So, for example, I was seeing things in single digits, 5 points, 10 points, but everyone in Tanzania was like, you need thousands of points. So a lion was 15,000 points. The wild dog was the top spot because it was more endangered at 20,000 points. But then we were thinking, you actually don't just want this about human carnivore conflict. You want it about things like combating illegal wildlife trade. So then we actually put pangolin as the top number of points because it's the most trafficked animal. It's very endangered. And it's something that was incentivized then if we gave it lots of points to leave it in the wild and not remove it for the trade. Something like impala is really important. So prey have to be rewarded as well. So people keep the prey around. And then obviously that way you have healthier habitats for large carnivores there and probably less pressure on people as well because they won't be, trying to prey upon livestock as much. So we do have impalas and things in Tanzania at about 2,000 points. The lion is significantly more because it's threatened and more conflict causing, but the pangolin is the top one here. But this can be very adapted to a local situation, depending on what is needed from the conservation perspective there.
Thank you for that. And so this is going to lead us into the next question, and this is to Gabriel, in terms of just how do you keep the CCT plus transparent and trusted? Since it's based on people knowing the points they're earning and which translates to the benefits, how do you manage to keep that transparent? And what changes have you seen in how participating communities view or respond to wildlife since this project began?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for the question. That is very, very interesting, and especially when you're working in a community setup. I'll give like sort of a set of 4 points or sort of steps just to make sure that the CCT benefits acquisition and the distribution becomes that sort of really transparent. One, it is very important that you walk into a community and you're starting CCT plus that they've got a thorough understanding of the whole process of the program. And that one is done by doing good sensitization meetings, good quality. Make sure you involve the youth, the old, the ladies, and everybody so that they can have a better understanding. How do you earn the points? How is it given out? And that sort of thing. The second thing is it is very, very important because here in Laikipia, we select small or they select small CCT committees in a village. They have to make sure that every CCT plus meeting, the attendance is normally made to be very good so that everybody gets on board, so that if there are changes, if there are what is being discussed, everybody is sort of up to speed, getting to know what is happening. The other big thing is we do not give benefits in terms of cash. A community makes a decision of how they want to spend their money. If, for example, they want to do bursaries of secondary schools, we do not give the money, but we provide checks that are already been written and given out. They want to build whatever they want to build. We provide the building material. We supply the benefits, right? And that really makes it quite open. And the CCT committee has to be involved in that all sort of through. The third and very, very important one is record keeping. At the office level, Lion Landscape office, we keep proper records of every single thing that is happening. At the committee level, they keep the same records. And lastly, the records are kept in a public board at the village or at the community level so that every single member of the CCT community gets to know that we got X number of points. This is what we spent for. This is what, including a delivery note being displayed up there. And many instances, even a list of beneficiaries who got into that system. For the point system, the camera trap officers who work for the community are always part of the downloads so that they can get to see, like, this is the number of animals, the species that was gotten, so that when all that is being tabulated, and the points are sent to the committee to have a look at, they will be there to confirm, like, yes, for the 3 months, really, we saw X animals sort of in the cameras, and just confirming the same. So in a nutshell, engagement all through the process really makes this a quite transparent process. The committee has to be engaged at the committee level, at the larger level, and just making sure that everything sort of works perfect. And people are really happy when they compare to other conservation programs that are being run. CCT is ranked very, very high in terms of transparency. Now, the second bit of the question is, what changes have we seen in the community since the inception of CCT? Normally, we do annual CCT celebrations, bringing like 3 or 4 CCT units together, and people would celebrate. And what I noticed over the periods we've been here is one day last year, we went to a CCT unit celebration, which brought 3 units together. And one elder woke up and spoke and said, like, before the coming of CCT, when we hear a hyena at night making the sound, we normally curse him and tell him to move very, very far away from the homesteads. But nowadays, when we hear hyena, we really would like to beg the hyena to come closer to home so that he can pass next to a camera trap to get pictures, because we know it translates into points. So all that, as we engage with the communities, we see positive changes, that people now are more tolerant to wildlife, and especially carnivores, compared to the time before the coming of the CCT program. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. And those changes raise the important question of how the program itself has adapted over time. And that's why my next question is to Amy, is asking just how has CCT Plus evolved since it began? And what has been the biggest lessons from implementing it across the different landscapes we work in?
It's evolved significantly, thanks, Alex. It's evolved, obviously, that movement from just benefits, which it started with for several years, and then to benefits plus penalties. And I think, though, it was valuable to have those few years where you went from the idea, just as Gabriel's just said, of it just being a cost, to the idea that wildlife could have benefits. I remember talking to people locally, and they said, for the first time, we're sort of seeing wildlife now as like second cattle. because cattle give us clear benefits, but now wildlife are giving us benefits too. So that was really important to start to see that. Then, though, we were seeing that obviously you could still have quite a lot of wildlife around, but still do things like poisoning, which could impact lots of vultures, lots of lions. So it's important to make sure that we also brought the penalties in, and we talked with communities a lot about that. And then making sure there were other ways that they could do conservation-friendly behaviours, because it may be that the wildlife populations dip for things that are out of their control. A disease outbreak, a drought, and the animals move elsewhere. So we were trying to encourage people then to do these long-term conservation-friendly behaviours, things like reinforcing your livestock enclosures, managing your livestock in a better way, avoiding poisoning. I'm trying to respond in kind of an agreed way, sort of if you have a depredation event, for example. So that was where the CCT Plus came from. And in each landscape, as Gabriel just touched on, we sit and we talk with the communities a lot, and we have lots of ongoing discussions. It isn't a one size fits it all. It isn't a here's your contract and you're done. We have these repeated discussions, and I think that's been the key, is it's very much co-developed with the communities and adapt it over time to what is needed there.
Okay, thank you, Amy. And those lessons and what we have learned as the program has adapted over time can also tell us something about where else the model might or may not work. So my next question to you is just asking, could this approach work for other species or ecosystems, and what conditions will need to be in place for it to work responsibly?
So was that to me, Alex?
Yes, to you, Amy.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Yeah, I think it definitely could work with many other species. We're having a talk just this morning with a project who was in Nepal looking at whether it would be useful to use for species like pangolins, for example. So, and I think anywhere where you've got wildlife where at the moment it's threatened, but people aren't seeing a clear, tangible value to it, this kind of thing, it's just a conservation incentive program. So it could be adapted to many other places. And again, the core elements that should probably be taken is that it has to be really considering that local context and putting the local people who live closest to that wildlife at the heart of it. And then I think it could be adapted, and we would learn a lot from trying it in other places to see what works best, what doesn't. It isn't going to be perfect everywhere. It isn't perfect even where we are. We've constantly got to adapt it, but I think it has a lot of potential.
Thank you for that. That wider potential brings us to the new partnership and the role of AZA institutions can play. So this next question is to Lily, and we're just asking what brought South African lion and lion landscapes together around CCT Plus, and what excites you most about the possibility of strengthening and scaling this project?
Thanks, Alex. And thanks again to everyone who's here. I see lots of people from different zoos and aquariums in the AZA. That's the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. That if you're not familiar with, that's the accrediting body that holds us to a high standard of animal care, but also conservation commitments and many other standards. And there's over 250 zoos and aquariums in that association. And I'm honored to get to be the program leader to coordinate lion conservation for the AZA. I see also lots of other conservationists that do lion conservation, but also other species in the attendees. So welcome everyone. Building on what Amy said, I am thrilled that this is an opportunity to learn from the lion landscapes model, what they've learned from and built on with scientific evidence of how to adapt on the CCT Plus model, to see how we can apply it elsewhere and help to scale up this model, both, of course, helping lions, but also other wildlife, whether that's in African landscapes or like the Nepalese example Amy was just talking about. There's a lot of opportunity here to use technology like camera traps with intention to engage and involve communities in the process and build buy-in and make those benefits tangible. From the AZA's Safe African Lion Program's perspective, we have existed for several years, and we are now at the stage of our strategic plan of saying, how do we make sure zoos and aquariums, when we welcome people through our gates to be inspired by our animals, including our lions and all those other wildlife, how do we leverage that to connect to the communities around the world who do the hard work of living with those animals, those counterparts in the wild? And those communities deserve support. And I am thrilled that we can learn from the Lion Landscapes model and find ways to encourage it to be applied elsewhere. And so this is a launch of our partnership. of inviting any zoo or aquarium or conservation organization to get involved, to think about how could I learn from this model? What could be applicable here? And from the zoos and aquariums perspective, if you have a different lion partner that you're working with, we will be creating opportunities for you to nominate those potential partners, to get involved and learn from lion landscapes, and potentially have some resources to enhance the implementation of more of this benefit sharing and trying out CCT Plus maybe in the other places. So there's just so much potential. Alex, you can hear I'm excited. I'm excited about that potential and really see that it really could help facilitate coexistence and mobilize more people anywhere in the world to thank the people who live with lions and other iconic species, pangolins and others, and say, we value them and we value your effort, and how do we make those connections?
Yeah, thank you, Lily. I just want to make that practical for any institution, and then ask the question that, sorry, particularly for zoos or conservation organizations who are already supporting field conservation, how can they contribute through this campaign, and what would the Conservation Payment Coalition mean in practice?
Great question. There's a variety of ways we can get involved, and we're just getting started. So we want to hear from potential zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations about how they're interested in getting involved. And so that might look like just joining future conversations where we talk more about the process of implementing CCT Plus, the process of designing community conversations that talk about empowering community members to hear what their needs are, that we heard so much in detail from Gabriel and Amy, as well as potentially nominating a field partner, an organization that's working on the ground with communities coexisting with important but potentially conflict-causing species. And then also we're looking to rally any organizations or foundations that want to join us in helping to fund this so that we can scale up. And funding might look like enabling those workshops and co-learning sessions, but also paying for more camera traps as costs, as well as the tangible benefits reaching the community members when photos are taken of those species, especially the high value, many points recorded for some certain species. That needs to translate to benefits. So there's multiple avenues for getting involved, first starting by co-learning together and then building from there. We're excited to see who wants to join in.
Okay, thank you, Lily. Maybe just one final thing, one final question for you is that how would CCT Plus complement, maybe rather than replace, an institution's existing field partnership?
Is that for me, Alex?
Yes, yes.
So this will not replace those valuable partnerships that any organization might have. I'll again keep sitting in my zoo seat of, we have these relationships with organizations and every zoo and aquarium does, and we should maintain those. But we need to come together and learn from models that are working and see how we can apply them in other settings and invite our field partners to learn from others, versus each zoo and each organization talking in their own silos and their own landscapes and wondering why we're not gaining traction. And that's the opportunity of the AZA SAFE program, just to bring together and co-learn together. But we want you, each zoo and aquarium, to maintain their partnership. And that's why we want to invite nominations of who are your field partners you would think would want to learn more and get involved in this way, and invite co-learning. Sophie put into the chat a Google form in the chat function. We'll put that also at the very end again, so people don't have to scroll up for it. But that's just a call for interest. And it's not a sign up for anything in particular at this time. We're just using this webinar as a launch to see who's interested in learning more. Do you have a lion or any conservation partner that might not even be focused on lions, but other target species that you're interested in potentially aligning with learning about the CCT Plus program? Because we all have similar goals. We want these populations of imperiled species to go up, but to get there, we need communities to be more tolerant. And I want to highlight what Gabriel said earlier. They have demonstrated that the CCT Plus program increases tolerance and people welcoming wildlife in their landscapes, which is a really hard thing to actually achieve. But it's a necessary precursor for people to make space for wildlife. And so we're thrilled that this is an opportunity to scale up and connect and learn from Lion Landscapes, but also support Lion Landscapes in providing more trainings and support to others, and getting more zoos and aquariums, and thus all of our visitors involved, looking at some of these camera trap photos, seeing how we can make it tangible and get more people involved. There's lots of opportunity here.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Lily, and thank you for all of us who have been adding their questions to the Q&A. Now that's where we are heading next, just to get some questions from the team and see we can respond to some of them. And the first question is saying, what are the use of those pictures? And I'll send this over to Gabriel.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Each picture in CCT is just more than a picture. So the camera traps will take a number of pictures, including wild animals, domestic animals, people passing through. So those pictures are put into a database and cleaning is done. We don't need really the pictures for humans and cattle. What we're interested in are the pictures of wildlife. And as said earlier, each animal species have got points tied to it. So all that is calculated in a period of 3 months. Then the points from the pictures collected by the camera traps, points are put into categories, and then they're now changed into benefits in terms of money. So the pictures are meant to give the communities that are involved in CCT points, which are translated into benefits. So that's how CCT works. And in CCT, as I said earlier, it's much more than a picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. This next question is to Amy, and Peter is asking, could this be adapted to individual landowners and cash payments rather than resource in kind? What about not having a competition? A picture is worth a fixed reward, no matter whether someone else gets more pictures. Sorry, but I read that.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think and again, the joy of this kind of stuff is it can be very adapted to lots of different models. We've had interest from like wolf conservationists in the US, and I think there would be a very different setup with individual ranchers. You'd probably have to have a certain amount of money per camera, and that's what used to happen with the wolverine dens in Northern Europe, where some of these payments for presence kind of models started. So you could do it as a set amount for a lion picture and a dollar value. The reason we did it as a competition originally is because we didn't want to come across some of the issues that you get with compensation programs where you don't know what the budget for the project is. So it ends up being vastly expensive. You can't budget it, you can't pay everyone, they all get disappointed. So we ended up with the villagers competing against each other, and the point said you're either first, second, third, or fourth in that grouping. And we knew how much first, second, third, or fourth got every 3 months, whether they got 1 million points or 20,000 points. So that was adapted for us so that we could physically do it. I think there are loads of ways this could be adapted depending on the funding situation and the conservation context.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Amy. And also this other question is still to you, Amy, asking, do you envision this as a continued effort, and how does funding work? What are the consequences of ending it might be for conservation?
Definitely, 100%. We are very, very clear that I think you need long-term commitments to these communities. If we come in and out, we start something, we stop it, we give benefits, we stop them, you lose so much trust and engagement. So we have to make sure we are in there for the long term. So we think at least a year out of, can we keep this project going? And the way that we do that traditionally is through philanthropic funding, including from zoos. So the way we're going to fund that is through all of you. And anyone else rich that you know. So, but it is a really important thing to make sure that we have enough funding going ahead. We're very honest with the communities as well, though, that if we're struggling and we have to pull in, sort of constrain our programs, which ones should be dropped or not. Happily, we haven't had to do that much yet. And this is a very sellable project for donors because it combines wildlife and local community presence. But it's something that all conservation funding, or most of it, is very fragile because a lot of it is based on philanthropy and things. So we are looking at building, say, a coexistence bond that we bring in different kinds of investors to give more sustainable financing. But that's still quite a few years out and probably will always need philanthropy.
Okay. The other question is asking about the operations on the ground, and it's saying when a camera goes missing, villagers immediately suspect poachers. Then, when community officers check the wildlife images during the check and see images of poachers, they know, won't they want to seek revenge on those poachers for stealing their cameras? And how do you handle this? So this will start with Gabriel, and then if Amy has something to add on it.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. That's quite a very good question because it's practical on the ground. So, quite often we will get those cases, say the camera getting lost or getting vandalized or getting wrong things. And in the CCT contract, the contract itself encourages positive conservation practices and discourages negative conservation practices. And that is where the plus comes in. So if poachers are seen in a camera and clearly seen, the community is going to lose some points out of that CCT cycle of 3 months because it's a poaching case that happened, so they're going to lose it. Some information in the CCT, the pictures in the CCT cameras must be treated confidential. Here in Laikipia, we've got cases of armed illegal persons, maybe pictures being taken by the camera. You can't go sharing because it'll have ripple effects, negative effects. So similarly, even if it's a poaching case, it needs to be addressed properly in a slow manner where it doesn't get negative drawbacks into the individuals involved in the poaching cases. So it needs to be addressed in a manner that's sensitive, in a manner that if we need to share that information with the government forces, it has to be high-level tech intel. But we try as much as we can not to do that. This is a social project, and every single thing we need to treat it socially. So I don't know whether I've attempted to answer that, but majorly, to be specific, in Laikipia, poaching is very, very low. In fact, for the years we've been around, we've never seen any of such cases. But I think Amy will shed some more light because in Tanzania, it's quite a live challenge. Thank you, Alex.
Okay. Welcome, Amy, in case you have anything to add on that.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just very aware we have many questions to get through. But quickly, I think absolutely theft and things, we do try to make sure the communities have that community incentive to act against people who are doing it. But we are very clear that, as Gabriel said, that this is very much about the communities. I mean, we want people to be, we don't engage in any kind of retaliation. We don't support that kind of stuff at all. And the benefit program means that people like pastoralists, for example, have to be able to get the benefits because they might be the ones who go out there and spear lions, for example. And you can't have these systems where a group of people ends up being demonized. So it has to be very carefully calibrated between who brings in the benefits and who bears the risks. These things are all openly discussed at community meetings. And as Gabriel said, we've really focused on community trust and making sure that we don't go to the authorities and tell on people because that would break our trust. So we've really tried to make sure that it is driven by the needs of the community and having those difficult but open conversations with them.
Okay. Yeah. Then this other question, Amy, I think you have trying to answer it live. And it's asking about do we only get rewards for photographic images, or are there other ways that we compensate, say, for lion killings and the rest?
So yeah, I was halfway through typing that on the run of time. So we aren't big fans of compensation in general because partly it only targets the people who've already had attacks, whereas what you want to do is be rewarding the people who live with this wildlife, maintain their livestock well, and don't have the attacks. So those people are actually the top people that we want to focus on with rewards. And we want to make sure that there's all sorts of issues of compensation about not verifying the kill quickly enough. And it also creates this illusion that it's somebody else's a wildlife. It's your lion that killed my cow. Whereas this way, we're saying these are your lions on your land and you should get the benefits. So that kind of framing is very different. So we have specifically focused on conservation incentives rather than compensation. We do help people if they have attacks, and Gabriel and the team do lots and lots of this, respond and try to say, how could we help you prevent an attack happening in the future? But our aim very much is rewarding people for presence.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Other questions, most of them have been answered in the chat. So if you look at it, most of the answers. But just the last question, which is to Gabriel. I think this is a follow-up on something you said. Someone's saying that you mentioned how some people are trying to encourage animals, some hyenas, to move in front of the cameras. Has this behavior increased in wildlife injuries?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. That's a very interesting question. That is very, very difficult. It's just but a wish. You wish the hyena could pass where the camera is, but in real sense, there's no way you can encourage. But from my experience in terms of work, when communities become friendly to wildlife, either carnivores and majorly grazers, they tend to spend much more time freely sort of around areas that are close to human beings. So that is the only way that you can encourage the wild animals to be free. Once the community accepts, and then nobody chases them away, nobody does anything. But then we know very well that prey, you know, or carnivores follow prey. So if you have enough grazers in your midst and very close, then you are assured that the carnivores would be coming around where cameras is because they will follow the grazers to feed on them. So really, yeah, I should say yes, that is how you can sort of make sure that you can get more carnivores getting closer to where cameras are. Be friendly to grazers, make sure that they have what they need, because if you need grazers, you need your rangeland to be better. They need grass, so they will come for the grass. Then, of course, the lions, the hyenas, and the rest will follow. So, but ideally, wanting them to come closer, I don't think there's magic of making sure that hyena comes. The magic is a balanced ecosystem where you have every single animal present, and then out of that coexistence and that wholesome ecological environment, then you'll have more carnivores getting into where the cameras are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
I just want to jump in there to highlight and support Gabriel and Amy and what they're talking through. They don't just hand the camera traps to a community and say, good luck, put them wherever, right? It's a process of teaching and advising and workshops, and I'm assuming, but also community engagement to learn about where to put them and those practices of welcoming grazers and welcoming wildlife. While the participants in the community are interested in getting buy-in, they're learning along the way and they're getting more involved in the project, and that helps reinforce the success of getting those photos, as well as increasing those tolerant behaviors, those trying to reduce those behaviors that would potentially lead to penalties. So I just want to hold up the team for creating this model that's not just a transaction, here's a camera trap, send us your photos, but it's a process of communities getting to know each other and getting involved, and then designing those contracts and what they want support for, the benefits for. And I saw several questions in there about how does funding work from the perspective of the community members, where if either of you could just give us a quick example, as well as funding for this overall. But that's something we'll dive into deeper into future sessions with groups of people who want to sign up to hear more and learn more in detail. That's part of what this campaign and offering to build an opportunity for co-learning will include. But Gabriel or Amy, just a quick reaction of sharing, how does it go from, oh, you have cameras, you have photos, and now benefits are going to the general community? What does that look like?
Gabriel, do you want to give any perspectives from the communities?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I had a question earlier that I saw in the chat of someone when I said we are not interested with pictures of cattle and sort of people. Really, the purpose of putting out the cameras, we want to capture the pictures of of wild animals, either carnivores or prey or whatever it is. So when I say we don't require those ones, it's because they do not earn points. Yes, we'll keep it, we'll delete whatever it is, but the pictures we're looking for are pictures of animals, not human beings, and therefore that I mean with that. Amy, you can give it a shot to the question, and then I'll fill it. Thank you.
I think you've covered it all. I think we're good. Thank you very much. But I think, yeah, it's really important just to make sure that these things, as I said, the core of this element is really trust and being based in the community. So when they have these questions, all the questions we're seeing now are great ones, and they're similar to the questions that come up with the communities. What do you do with pictures of people? We have to make sure that people feel trusted. It's not a way of trapping them into something. How do you make it fair between different villages? Is somebody else cheating on it? All these sorts of things. It takes months and years of sitting and talking with people to build those trusted relationships. And it's something we're very aware of when we move out into looking at other projects to work with. You need projects that have built those trusted relationships to think of how do we adapt this. And it is not perfect. Again, we are learning all the time. There are things we do wrong. There are things we need to change, but we work on that with the communities we've built there. And we're really excited to build this wider community here as well, with all of you, with other people beyond it, to think about how can we grow it and strengthen it further.
Yeah, maybe to add into something else, and probably we've been speaking of the positives of CCT, it's worth mentioning that it also has challenges. And as Emmy and Lily did put, this is a journey that you need to walk together with the communities. Through thick, through hills, through whatever it is, it has its own challenges. And as Emmy has put earlier, trust here is very, very, very important. You must build trust with the communities that you work with. And very, very interestingly, is communities do communicate with their neighbors. They get to know. It was very difficult to start the first CCT unit in Laikipia. The rest were very simple because the communities had already learned from their neighbors. They can do their own intel and get to ask, how does CCT work? Does it have benefits? So presently, we have much more communities knocking onto our doors saying, hey, we need a CCT unit. So trust here is very, very important. And then the moment you build the trust, any challenge that comes into it, either a camera being broken or a camera being lost or any sort of anything that comes into it, it's easier to walk over it because you've already built trust with the communities and they know what exactly it is. If it's a penalty, this is what we are going to lose. This is what we are going to lose off the benefits if a camera is stolen, if a camera is destroyed. So it becomes easier. So here, the golden point here is building trust with the community so that they trust you and then you also trust them. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you everyone. Before we close, just a reminder that if you are interested or would like to learn more about this Save African Lion campaign or explore how you can be involved, please complete that short interest form that has been shared in the chat, and we'll be very pleased to continue the conversation with you after today's webinar. So we are moving to the last bit, and we have one final question for you. And we are going to share the Mentimeter again. We are just asking that after today's discussion, what gives you the greatest hope for the future of coexistence? You will use the same procedures before. You can either scan the QR code or you can use the code and go to the mentimeter.com. Yes, so just add a single word or a short phrase that comes to mind. The question is, after today's discussion, what gives you the greatest hope for the future of coexistence? Let's keep typing. Community seems to take the center stage. Then you have also collaboration. Community buying seems to keep on coming. Okay. A partnership. Okay. Yeah, thank you, everyone. It is wonderful to see those respondents coming together, and they are a fitting way to end today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining, and please fill out the form or reach out to us via email if you have questions. We look forward to connecting with anyone who wants to hear more or join in. Thanks so much.
Okay. Yeah.